Hey, welcome back to another episode of Practical Youth Ministry Tips. My name is Eric with a K. I'm your host, and I'm so glad you're here. And as you can see, there's somebody on the screen with me. This is my friend, Josh Arana. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well, Eric with a K. How are you, sir?
Dude, so good. Josh, thanks for joining me today. So tell everybody who you are, why you're here, how we know each other, all that stuff. Give us a little bit of background as to wherever you've been and how you ended up to where we are today on this conversation.
Well, my name is Josh, like Eric mentioned. Eric and I go back a couple of years, work together in ministry. Um, Eric was my boss's boss, and then he became my boss. And so we had that relationship, and then we became friends because I liked him still. So we worked together in ministry, doing youth ministry, kids, family ministry stuff, and then we did that for a little while, and then I felt a calling on the Lord to step into a new season. And so by faith, I trusted in God and started my own business in social media marketing and management and web design and management. And so now I'm kind of in that space, in that world, a content creator for those spaces, and started my business a year and a half ago, and working towards building a full digital marketing agency that includes social media marketing and website design and I think I said social media marketing, so social media management and all things digital marketing. And the goal is to be able to be a resource for brands and businesses specifically that are making impact in their community. That's something that's on my heart. So something like churches and ministries and nonprofits are kind of in line of what I'm working towards is building as being a resource for that type of business and brand. And so yeah, that's where I've been. Why am I on here is because my friend asked me to be part of this. So I'm really excited to have a little conversation about social media. It's one of the things that I'm most passionate about. I'm not sure if people already know from the title of what we're going to talk about. And so these are two areas that I really am passionate about, doing social media and then integrating that, marrying that with ministry. I think is an incredible and effective tool in spreading the gospel and reaching the lost, and also getting people plugged in and connected in new and exciting ways. I think social media is still a very exciting field, and a lot of it is unknown and it's very creative. And so I think it's really exciting to be able to marry the two together. So I think that was kind of a long answer for a short question. So I hope that helps.
No, that's great. So, Josh, I really enjoyed working with you. We actually have had the opportunity to work in a couple of different places together, and watching you when we actually finished up at our last church almost about the same time, within a month of
Yeah.
each other. We had talked a lot about what we were going to move to next, and me stepping into youth ministry coaching, and you stepping into the whole world of social media and marketing and all that, and kind of coming out of your last role doing web stuff and being the online campus pastor and all that. And I've watched this past year and a half of you diving in, and man, there's so many posts that I click save on that I'm like, I got to come back to this post, because what you're talking about is super helpful, not only just for my personal Instagram, but the ministries that I'm working with and helping. And you were the one who, the main church that I'm working with, you're the one who developed our website, which I absolutely love. And I'm having so much fun kind of diving in some of the things that you taught me on there. So, Josh, our audience is those who are in youth ministry. So you have some cred, both having been in youth ministry and being your life as social media. Talk a little bit about how those two marry well, like they combine well together, and how it's helpful to use social media. There's going to be some who are like, they're social media like natives, like they were born with Instagram and Facebook, whatever, into their hands. But talk a little bit about how those two work well together, and maybe in that answer why we should be using social media to help further the cause and build the kingdom that we're working on.
Well, I don't know if there's any other ministry that would be perfect to be on social media than youth ministry. Personal opinion, former youth pastor, and now currently in the social media spaces. I don't know that there's any other ministry. It's honestly, I think, still a world that is predominantly um, the target audience that youth pastors are trying to reach. Um, you know, platforms are aging. Certain platforms are aging as people, as people are growing up and getting older, and so new platforms come up. But the idea of social media was created in, roughly, arguably the last 15, 17 years, depending on how far back you want to go with talking about certain spaces of social media. And so I just think personally, social media is perfect. It is a perfect complement to doing what you're doing. If you're a youth pastor, you're involved in youth ministry, you have any sort of impact on the next generation, I think social media is a perfect complement. I don't believe that it is something that should replace some of the more foundational things that take place in youth ministry. The way, obviously the teaching of God's word, the corporate worship, the personal devotion that you could be instructing your students to do. I think what you do I think social media can be used as a tool and a vessel to communicate some of the things that are taking place in youth ministry. It's a perfect avenue to share stories in life transformation that's taking place. It's a perfect way to complement and to reinforce messages that were shared on the weekend or midweek services. It's a perfect way to communicate any upcoming events or ways for students to get plugged in, to serve. It's a perfect opportunity to engage even individuals who are also influencing the life of your students, whether it be parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. It's a perfect way to engage with those types of individuals and for them to know what is taking place in your ministry. I honestly just think it's a unique way to just kind of share the message of what is happening and share the stories. And I honestly think that it is a missed opportunity to not be on social media, not to at least to be sharing what God is doing in your ministry through social media. It could be a mistake. It could be a hindrance. It could be honestly one of the best things that you could do throughout the year is engaging with students in that way. You never also know. I think we take for granted how people could even use social media to quickly, effectively share a post to kind of help, and then their own way share their faith. If a kid takes, I might be kind of already getting into something else, but if a kid resonated with a post that took place in your social media, they share it to their stories, they share it to their own social media account. That in a way is them kind of expressing their faith. You just never know how a student will take something on social media and express it in their own way and expose other people, other students in their lives to hear the gospel message. You just never know. And so for me, I'm convinced that youth ministry, youth pastors, youth directors, they just need to be involved in social media in some form or fashion, which I think many are. I think what takes place and what happens is that they probably get overwhelmed at the thought of, I have to manage this thing when I am already managing so many other things. I have to manage this and do it well. And I can understand that there could be some hesitancy around that. Of course, some safety concerns and some things that I want to, maybe we can get into that a little bit, but there's, some safety concerns that you need to be smart when you're utilizing social media. But I'm 100% convinced youth ministry, youth pastors, they should be on social media to help use that as a way to engage with their students.
Yeah, that's really good. Josh, I want to come back to something you touched on about how long it's been around, right? I think one of the earliest renditions of social media was MySpace. Yeah. I remember being on MySpace, having my top 8 and all that friends, stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a place to connect with other people in a way that we never had before. I mean, I think the only thing that was even close to it prior to that was I remember playing cards online, like
a solitaire,
like not solitaire, but I'm just blanking on the game, the card game, like Hearts.
Oh, okay.
On Yahoo Hearts. And my friend Doug Roa, who lives in Norway, we would connect playing Yahoo Hearts online. And then, of course, there was AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, and Yahoo Messenger, and those kind of things.
Yep.
Those were like chat things, which I guess would be considered some sort of social media type of thing back in the day. But then came Facebook, and like every iteration has kind of been swallowed up in a sense by the next one, even though Facebook is still quite a giant in communication world, but the younger generations keep pushing those. They don't become their favorites, right? So this is why I mention it, because Facebook is probably the place where most parents are connected, though the younger the parents are now, it may be more Instagram and
Sure.
students. And I was just reading something the other day that the top social media platforms would be Instagram, and then TikTok, and then Facebook, and then Snapchat kind of has dropped quite a bit, interestingly enough. Threads did not seem to make that list. I think Threads may be more like Google Plus, which had a hot minute, but disappeared. And those who have no idea what Google Plus is, it's in the Google graveyard, which I found yesterday. I was like, what was that thing called? I was thinking it was Google Wave, which I think is another thing by Google. And there's a whole like Google cemetery out there. But
I will say that I think that people are still using Threads, not like the first 2 or 3 weeks. But you're right. Google Plus was a thing that Google tried and it failed. It just is.
And I get on Threads every now and then. It's on my second page. Like, so I'll click on it every now and then, and I see that people are still using it. It just, I don't think it. I think one of the things that causes social media to really grab on, particularly with a younger audience, is when it's organic. And I found this. My parents didn't find it. Everybody, I'm on this. Clubhouse was like that for a minute, and there's been a few other ones, House Party, and I think those are the names of those things. But it's like, oh, can I get an invite to that? That kind of stuff on the ground level. But yeah. So you did talk about, Josh. You did talk about the dangers. What do you see are some potential dangers with social media in youth ministry?
I think one of the things is I think there could be a lack of boundary. That could be a concern for many people if they're not careful in the way that they conduct themselves on social media. And I'm not necessarily talking about public posting, but even just in the way that direct messages take place, DMs. I think those can be a slippery slope of dangerous territory if there are not strict and tough boundaries that are set in place. One of the things that we tried to implement when I was overseeing a youth ministry with social media, we tried to implement specific roles that certain leaders would be in charge of. And I knew that for certain leaders who were typically a little bit older and were a little bit more on top of safety and security, most likely were a parent or some sort of parent-like person, would be somebody who is kind of in charge of DMs and would respond never from their own personal account, but they would always be responding from the organization account, the youth ministry account, to a student. There were certain prompts that were set up so that there was language that was approved that people knew that they could use instead of kind of like using their own language that didn't sound like the ministry, which is a direct reflection of the church. So we wanted to make sure that we were very careful on what kind of language we were using. There were certain rules, and when an individual was allowed to respond to a DM. So we weren't responding to DMs at 2:30 in the morning. We weren't really on social media at 2:30 in the morning. Nobody on our team, so that there wasn't any perception of, I don't know, there just wasn't any perception of just like weird activity taking place. So we usually had somebody was willing to look at DMs starting at like 7 in the morning, which was around the time the kids were either starting school or getting to school. So that made sense for us. 7:30 up until maybe like 5 or 6 p.m. that day. That sort of made sense to us. And then social media kind of shut down for the night, unless we saw that there was some sort of emergency, which had happened once, that there was an emergency. Somebody was trying to get a hold of me when I was a youth pastor, and I didn't see the direct message, but somebody on my team saw the message. Then they called me and said, we got this DM on Instagram. We think you need to take a look at it. I looked at the DM. Yes, it was an emergency. Got the contact information from our church database, was able to connect with the parents of the emergency that took place. So that was also a blessing. But that emergency came in, which, I really appreciate that came in, and we were able to act quickly to help and be there for for the family. So I think, every ministry will have to kind of consult their church leadership to make sure that they are following accurate and relevant parameters. But you want to make sure that you are equipping people correctly. You want to make sure that they know what they are supposed, how they're serving. You want to make sure that there are strict boundaries that are taking place. I think the stricter the boundary, the better, especially because when you're on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and you're responding in the DMs and you're trying, things get lost in translation because there's no tone of voice. You're kind of reading it, and people are reading responses based off of their own perception and their own filters. And so somebody could take something the wrong way that you did not intend. And so you just want to be careful on all of those things, and just be cautious of that stuff. And I just think that whatever parameters and boundaries you set physically in the ministry, in terms of let's say, the type of people you have serving in your ministry, assuming that they are background checked, assuming that they're, already part of your church regularly, whatever that is, the parameter and the boundaries are set, I would say even 10 times more that if they're involved in social media. So there's an extra level of trust for that, so that without a doubt, that the person who's handling your social media is a very, very trusted individual. That would be my personal preference. I also think that, there could be danger of, dangerous thing. I think anything that has to do with the ministry, all communication goes through the organization. I think I already said that. Never have a leader respond out of their personal, account, or if they get a message from a student, try to redirect it back to the organization. I think those are a couple things that I would do if I was kind of in charge of that. And then so there's something else I would do if my ministry was in social media and I was overseeing that, is I would have somebody who was monitoring the comments. There was one time that we were doing a sermon series. It was all about kind of like social justice things and what the Bible had to say about certain topics that the culture was speaking into, but we wanted to come at it from a biblical perspective, of course. And it was very much relevant to the life of what our students were going through at the time, and many of them are continuing to go through. And so we posted some content that was based off of the sermon. And so the weekend message, and so if people were in the message, they knew what he was talking about. They had the context already. And so, but we would receive comments from people, friends, or people who didn't attend the weekend service. So out of context, people would get really offended. And so they would leave us some nasty comments. This didn't happen a lot, but it happened enough where we had to have somebody monitor the comments because your boy couldn't see everything, couldn't watch everything. And so we would have somebody who would either respond godly, Christ-like, or, kind of took it upon themselves to remove the comment if they felt like it was something that was, we just couldn't bounce back from it, and sent them a DM. And we had a process of connecting with the individual to let them know that we still cared about them as an individual, even though we didn't care about their comment, or we didn't want to, and usually that happened because somebody was like cursing or using pretty foul language. That's usually the reason why we would remove that type of a comment. I was never scared to have some controversy on the comments. That never scared me. But it was, if it was foul language or, coarse language, we would remove it. So I would really kind of have your team be part of monitoring. And people, even people who were monitoring the comments didn't necessarily have to do that from logging into the account. If they saw it from their own personal account, then they would text whoever was on monitoring the account, and they would let them know, hey, there was a comment on this post. And so people would work together in that and make sure that it was just a healthy place for, for people to grow in their walk with God. That was always a goal. So I think my point would be, whatever it is that you implement in your ministry in terms of how leaders conduct themselves and how they even got into the ministry in the first place, prayerfully consider upping that standard even more so when it comes to social media, because it is so easy to fall into traps. Social media was not set up for the church to be successful. And I'm not saying that the church cannot be successful. It just wasn't set up that way. And so the church needs to step up and live out integrity, live out godliness, and really kind of protect and defend themselves and protect the sheep, the flock, so that, so that we are spreading God's word effectively on social media. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I know, that's really great. So a couple of things you talked about, Josh, that I thought were really good points. One you mentioned, like going with what your church policy is, that type of a concept, right?
Yeah.
Remember, we at our last church together, we had our insurance company come in and talk about a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things was safety with kids and teenagers. And they were okay with direct messages or text messages. They just talked about how we have to be really careful. And some churches may have a policy where it's like strict, you're not allowed to have direct contact. And so those can be, that can seem to be a hindrance, but I think a way around that can be group text or group DMs, right?
Yeah.
So if you have group, like you have a small group, all the conversation is inside of a group chat.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great way to have those conversations, because then there's never any like potential weird stuff, right? The other thing you talked about was having multiple people, and you didn't say it this way, but what you alluded to it, having multiple people who had login information to your social media, which I think is really good, Josh, because yes, can you delete stuff? Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know how to do all that stuff. I haven't ever looked into trying to delete DMs, but I love that concept of like, what if you had multiple people who manage your social media? Then then you kind of you just want to remove risks, right? As much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So two more things I'd love to have you talk about, Josh.
Can I speak onto one thing really
Yeah.
quick? Don't lose your thought. But one thing I want to speak to is that, let's say that I always had the policy when it came to small groups is that you would have more than one small group leader leading a small group. I think that personally, call me old school, but that's ideal for me. You have two leaders who are leading a group of 10, 12, I don't know, 10, 12 students. Let's just say you had a small group that only had one leader, just because of just how your numbers work. Okay, that happens, that you don't have enough leaders for students. That takes place. I always kind of relied on leaders, certain leaders, to kind of take part in being in two groups, in the sense of being in the communication of another group. My wife was one of those individuals. She led 11th and 12th grade small group, but I didn't have enough middle school leaders to kind of help have multiple leaders or whatever at one point. So she was also kind of part of the communication for a middle school group, so that it didn't fall on one leader. I would encourage people to just be as creative as possible, think outside the box as much as possible, rely on your leaders. I know that leaders are constantly, really good leaders are constantly looking for ways to continue to serve if they're able to. But I cannot stress how important that is. I think you make it a good point. Cannot stress how important it is that there is multiple layers of protection for your leaders, for yourself, for your ministry. So I just wanted to make that
point. And it also
out there.
protects the students as well. So I think
yes,
that's really
that's good. That's a good point. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so the two things I'd love to talk about before we wrap up, Josh. One, which social media platforms should we be using, and maybe what are some of the benefits of the different ones, or some that concept, or should we have just one, or should we be on all of them? And then the other one is, I'd love to talk about, and we'll use this one to wrap up, but and I'm saying it so I don't forget it, but moving to what's the best practices for using social media, and how often should we post and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Okay. I love both those questions. So the first one, which social media platform should you be on? You should be on all of them. Wait, all of them that you can manage well and effectively. So because they're free, right? They're all free. They wouldn't cost the ministry anything. I always love free stuff as a youth pastor. So be a part of as many as you can to get your message out there. But one of the worst things you could do is sign up and be on a social media platform and not use it at all. So you'll want to think about which platform gets your message out there quickly and effectively, and what makes sense for your target audience. I as a youth pastor, it didn't make sense to put all my effort into building up a Facebook platform. That didn't make sense to me to put all the effort in there. What made sense for me, and we're going back 6-7 years ago, but what made sense for me at the time was to really put all my effort into running Instagram really, really well. So it kind of depends on your specific situation. A couple questions I would ask is where are my students at? What platform are they using? I think that's number one, your target audience. Your first target audience is your students. Where are they on? They're on Instagram. Okay. Should I be on Instagram? If they're on TikTok, okay, you ask yourself, should I be on TikTok? Can I be on TikTok? If they're on Snapchat, ask yourself, can I be on Snapchat? Should I be on Snapchat? Those are, I think, the three top that the students are on right now. YouTube, I I think kids are on YouTube more than we realize. Um, can I be on YouTube? Should I be on YouTube? Should my ministry be on YouTube? Um, and then you kind of then move into what can I effectively do that won't kill me, that won't run my schedule into the ground. And for me, what worked was Instagram Facebook combo is what worked for me, mainly because there's an ability to cross post. So you post something on Instagram and you can set up your accounts so that it also posts to a Facebook page. And that made sense to me because yes, you assume that parents are on Facebook. I think parents are now more likely to be on Instagram, but you have people on Facebook and Instagram, and then you're getting your message out there on two platforms. You can't necessarily cross post on Instagram and TikTok, but you can post original content on both those platforms. You just got to go through the effort of reposting it on, let's say you post on Instagram first, you got to go through the effort and the steps of reposting it on TikTok. So you just gotta have to ask yourself the question: what makes sense for my schedule? What makes sense for the ministry? What makes sense for the kids that are going to be engaging with this content? I think those are a couple things you'll want to look at. For me personally, I think youth ministries are still winning on Instagram. I think that's a winning platform. It's cheap, it's free, it's relatively easy to use or easy to learn. I think there's a really pretty good return on your investment on Instagram. TikTok is where kids might be on more than Instagram. Arguably, they could be on TikTok more, but it would probably take a greater effort on your part to craft a video correctly and well enough to be able to post it on TikTok. I hear what those who are really doing well on TikTok, it's because they're posting 3-4 times a day consistently. At those times, I haven't been able to personally really. I love consuming content from TikTok. I love how fast it is and how easy it is and how I get random videos and information. And I feel like for a while I was getting more information on Twitter, like news information on Twitter. Now I feel like I get it from TikTok before anything else. So I love that algorithm of how like it's just like pushing things out there. But it didn't make sense. TikTok was starting to come around, or starting to be talked about in the US when I left, even when I left ministry. So you'll have to kind of ask yourself, is it something that I'm able to do well and keep up? One of my clients actually reached out to me today and said that they actually want to put one of their accounts on TikTok. And I'm like, why? Your target audience isn't even on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? Like your target audience, well, I don't want to say with it, but they're not on TikTok. So what you're going to do is you're going to create all this content to reach no one or reach people that are not even the people that you should be servicing. So why do that? Why spin your wheels trying to create that? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so you really kind of have to ask yourself those questions: is what makes sense for me to be on? Which platform does it make sense for me to be on right now? Generally, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok are the three answers. Probably more than likely it's Instagram, because then you can keep it up. You can do well. There's still a community aspect for Instagram that works well that I don't see so much on TikTok. TikTok still feels performance based, still feels like kind of look at me and look at how cool I am type of thing. Instagram has kind of moved a little bit more into an authentic community type of a space. So I think ministries do well to be on Instagram. If you have the bandwidth and you have the support and you can play the long game on TikTok, I think you should get on TikTok and try it out and see if you're able to do that. So that's my long answer.
Really good.
Long answer, but that's what I
like. Josh, you said find out where your students are at. Like, yeah, maybe that's a thing you do at the beginning of every year. Hand out a survey, just a quick survey. What social media platform are you on? And the greatest amount of students, that's where you focus. I think that's really solid. For me, my platform, My main thing is Instagram, but and YouTube. But I'm also I send it to Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And with YouTube Shorts now, I'm doing a short every week as well, just a snippet, which is sending it back to the long form where they'll see this video. But that's a 60-second, currently 60-second max. They're talking about moving up. Some people have already gotten there where you can do up to 3 minutes, which I believe TikTok can now go up to 3 minutes.
Up to 10 minutes.
10 minutes. That's right.
Yeah.
But I've been doing the 90-second and then a 60-second version for YouTube Shorts. But that's where my audience sits in those realms, right? The Snapchat, I think when I first came to California, I kind of banned Snapchat from our volunteers and said, hey, we're not doing Snapchat with students. I don't care what you do as adults with adults, because originally Snapchat was designed to be able to send pictures and video that disappears so nobody would catch you, right? Yeah. That's transformed and all that stuff. But again, I think it's also good for your leadership to know and have some insight into what is it you're using, where you at, so that there's checks and balances for all of that stuff. So, okay, let's wrap it up with this, Josh. Talk about best practices for posting and what kind of content. I know we had and this was largely, this kind of came during when we were shut down and COVID and all that stuff. We did like Meme Mondays and Wacky Wednesdays, and we did devotionals, which I don't think really caught on that much, but it was a good, we just did a lot of experimenting with that. Talk about some of that stuff. And then I think you've got a free gift you want to talk about at the end here. But talk about that first.
Okay. So one of the things you want to make sure that you are doing is you are building a community, that your content is for, the purpose is for building your community and engaging that community. And that's the idea. And so when you look at it in terms of youth ministry, how are you using, the question I would be asking myself is, how are we using our content to reach kids and students of where they are, to empower them to live a life that honors and glorifies Christ, i.e. loving people in their community and bringing people into a relationship with Jesus? And how do we kind of elevate and equip them to live the best life possible that honors God? You want to kind of ask yourself those types of questions with your content. And so what I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to kind of experiment. Like Eric said, there was a lot of experimenting we did. Some things did not work out. Some things, it was quickly we found out that it just wasn't going to work. And then some things, they stuck on and we kept doing them for a while. You'll want to experiment some of these things and figure out if some of this stuff is going to work for you and your ministry. Some of the stuff I would encourage you to do is I would have some sort of reference to the previous week's message, whether it was Sunday or Wednesday, whatever message you want your kids to kind of live out that week. Maybe it's both. I don't know. Whatever message you want to kind of have them, you want to reinforce that. And I would reinforce that multiple times on the feed. I would reference that in the stories as well. I would share stories as much as possible. I would share whatever transformation is taking place in your ministry, whether it's somebody's coming to Christ, somebody got baptized, somebody is serving in Mexico. We're in Southern California, so Mexico, they went down to Mexico and they're serving in Mexico. You have a local ministry that's taking place and your students are serving local ministry. You have students serving in your church. You want to share, you want to highlight that. I would do that. I would also promote anything that's coming up that helps gets your students involved. Of course, what always worked with us is any special events we would post out there, usually with some sort of contest that our leaders were doing. And we would say, the first 5 students who comment on this post, they get to go to this event for free or whatever. That would help promote the event, and it also kind of it allowed some engagement. So you want to promote any ways for kids to get connected. You want to and then you wanted to try to be as relevant as possible. You want to be fun and be relevant. There's a lot of things happening with trending audios and trending things that are happening on social media. And although those could seem stupid and a waste of time, I think that helps build a connection of your kids, your students seeing and saying, oh, these guys are somewhat relevant, or they have an idea of what's happening in my world, in my space. And I think students love it. I think whether they tell us or not, I think they love it when we do those stupid things, when we're doing that that stuff, I think they kind of love it because I don't know, I think it reinforces this kind of idea of like, my leaders get me, my pastor gets me, kind of. And I think that kind of helps. That's not necessarily sharing the gospel, right? But that is building a relationship, which is a goal, I think, in youth ministry. So I would do some of those things. Now, when it comes to content ideas, um, obviously things that you come out of scripture, things that, if you want to do a couple of, a couple 30 seconds of a worship song that's really popular in your students in your youth group that your students are loving. Again, I said sharing stories, getting to know you. You could do a post about getting to know a leader, a picture of the leader, and then you swipe it and some information about them. I think those are different games and competitions. I mean, there's so many things that you could do to kind of reinforce the word of God and the lessons that you are teaching, but then also kind of connect with your students. And so I think that it is so important for you to be as creative as possible. I think just as important as it is to be creative on social media, it is even more important to be consistent on social media. When we talk about this, I think it's still a big thing that in youth ministry, it's so important to have consistent leaders that are dependable, and leaders that students know that they can rely on. I think that needs to also translate onto your social media. Your social media needs to be a consistent place, a dependable place, a place where students know that they can feel loved and cared for, and they're going to learn a little bit more about God and Jesus, and be equipped a little bit to live out the life Monday through Friday in their schools with their families to share the love of God with Jesus. So I have created, like Eric alluded to, I've created a little resource for you guys to access. It's a little bit of a content calendar that you guys can access. I'm not sure where they can access it, Eric.
They're going to access it in the link in the description below.
In the description below, you go ahead and click that link and follow the prompts, and you'll be able to access this content calendar and some best practices that I've put together. And my hope and my prayer is that this is something that is a resource to you, even if it just sparks ideas and you want to do your own thing. I hope that this is something you can reference and that sparks some ideas in you and for your ministry. And that helps you to be as effective as possible on social media that honors God, but also reaches your students.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate that. And I know you've given me some content calendar ideas in the past, and that's been super helpful for the ministries I've been a part of. It's fun. I think about like when I look at different youth ministry Instagram pages, some of them are all announcements. It's just announcements, and it's, they've gotten on Canva or whatever, and it's just graphics. And that's great, but your student, that's an announcement platform for parents to know instead of hanging it on your fridge, right? I think, I think you want to mix that in, but you said like stories, like, man, you get students' faces on, you have them tell stories. You have, like, I think one of the churches I've been involved with, like after every student service, they would do a recording with a student who would talk about, this is what this week's message was about. Like, what if you took a student leader and that's what you had a different one each week, and they shared, this is what the message was that we talked about in youth group. And they gave a 60-second, 30-second synopsis of what struck them. Like, I think that's really cool. And so you have, the more faces you have, the more engaging, because people want to see themselves, just like when you show a video.
Absolutely.
They want to see themselves. So I think that was really good. I being creative too is fun. I remember one of the things we did during, lockdown and during the pandemic, we had, we're doing our live streams on YouTube and Instagram, and we gave away prizes, and whoever won, whoever campus, whatever youth pastor had the student was at their campus that won, they would go to their house and, I remember
chop off something. Oh yeah.
I remember Eric Wade got like in like almost like a hazmat suit and brought like on a long stick the prize and went to the door, but had that all recorded, and then we played it back the next week.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff is just super fun, and following some trends and trending audios and all those kind of things. I've seen youth groups who have handed over their social media to students and let them run with it, or have a show that's weekly that's run by students. All that stuff is great. The content calendar, thank you for that gift. Again, that's in a link in the description below. That's super awesome, and I think will be really helpful to everybody. So Josh, thanks for coming on, bro. We didn't talk about this, and won't get too specific, but the first question is, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah.
And are you available to hire to help ministries with their social media?
Yes, I am. Okay, so you can find me on Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me and to connect with me. So my Instagram, I don't know if he's going to put up a graphic or lower third right here. It's going to say at the Josh Arana. You can find me on Instagram, and yeah, I'd love to connect with you and see if I can answer any questions for you. Of course, let me know. And yes, if you are in need of some help managing your social media, in the next week or so, if it hasn't been already launched by the time this video gets posted, I am also doing like a coaching call that's about to go live. A couple of like final tweaks and stuff that could also be something that you could access if you need help with that. And so all that information is going to be on my Instagram. But yes, I would love to connect with you. If you need help with anything, please send me a DM. I'd love to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Love you, man. And this was great.
This is awesome, dude. Thanks.
All right. We will be back every single week with another episode. We've got some really great stuff planned for next week. Come back to the Practical Youth Ministry Tips podcast. See ya.